Previously on Project SeaCamel.
And that is the first piece. Let's try if that has been cured. Nope, it has not. I kind of suspected this, that the epoxy might not cure really fast in these temperatures. It is now 3rd of September and the temperatures have dropped maybe by 15 degrees. And yeah, the winter is coming and the fall is coming. And last night was really cold. It was maybe around 5 degrees Celsius. So no wonder the epoxy hasn't cured. It says in the container that it should have 17 to 24 Celsius. So yeah, we're not even near that. And that is one issue making these kind of epoxy works here in Finland. And that's why we need to insulate the shed eventually. But this last week, I contacted a couple of epoxy suppliers and I tried to find epoxy that would be usable at a little lower temperatures than this particular brand. We'll see about that, but it also means that I don't have right now the epoxy to laminate this frame. I think in a couple of weeks that should be in order. Meanwhile, I need to do something else, and what we have on the list right now is to do more clamps for this lamination and also testing the CNC router if it's straight to cut these parts. So you can imagine if the router is like this, it can be tilted in some way like this, and then the cuts won't be 90 degrees in all directions. So I need to test that. Oh, and of course we have all these spacer pieces ready to go here. I cut them all last night, so I need to clean them up a little bit and glue them together as one piece. The cut went very well after I made these tabs a little bit higher and longer, so all parts are firmly in their places here. They could be even bigger, especially in this direction where the grain go like this. It can separate quite easily with some side force like that. As the grain goes in this direction, So this is what I was talking about. There's 3 pieces in each that has 2 20mm and 1 17mm, so it's total 57. One of them looks funny, and what happened here is just what I mentioned when I was cutting them, so I need to check that the router is actually cutting it on the right side of the line. In this case, there was one piece where it was on the wrong side. I made 2 of these in 2 separate sessions, but from the same file, so yeah. Of course, it's symmetrical, so there is 2 sets. They are exchangeable, so what I think I'll do it just like this. This should probably work. There's always something, you know. And I also realized that this is a pretty big job to glue these all, so there is 14 of these spacer clamps, and yeah, I need to glue them in together, and all my clamps are in that lamination over there. So I need to get a bunch of new rods to make those bolt rod things and then glue these down. One reason I did the table and all these things as I did was the availability of this stuff. So these are just ready to go rounded sticks, diameter of 12 millimeters. And they fit into these holes, of course, very well. And I also use them to put together these spacers. And they are pine, so basically I can also glue them with epoxy inside the frames, and they should be the same material as everything else. These are not obviously pieces of the boat, so I'm just using regular cheap wood glue. And I think I mentioned at some point that there's a little bit of difference between these threaded rods. Some of them are bit larger than the others, and they are very snug fit with the holes. This particular one goes quite easily through there. But it's a bit annoying. And then just repeat. And before anyone comments, this is just temporary job, because eventually I'm gonna do these from single glued wood piece and cut them with the CNC as one go. Now this was just scrap pieces, getting them together before I tested the bigger router bit. Yeah, so kind of extra job. This is the bit I've been using so far. It's just hardware store, regular bit. And this is the new one. And actually I have never touched a bit like this or even seen one live before this. So yeah, I'm pretty amateur with this kind of thing, but it should fit right in there. I will check that the cutting depth is enough for this. So this is 57 millimeters. Yeah, it's here and there. Maybe I'll take it a little lower. Place where I bought this, they have very good stock of different bits. But the hard part is that this is pretty small, my collar here. So the maximum, I think it's 13 millimeters. And all the bigger tips are kind of 14 or 18 millimeters in thickness, so it's a bit hard to find longer bits. I'm a bit nervous about this. All right, now it should cut a cube from this material, so 57 by 57 by 57 millimeters. Oh, need to turn on the spindle first. It's a bit annoying. The spindle controller won't turn itself on. I need to push this run button every time, and I haven't still turned the phases, so I have to put the reverse on as well. It should plunge 15 millimeters at the first try, so fingers crossed it works. This this is too slow, plunging down, it will burn. That was intense. I think it was also a success. I will show you a little closer. So check out this edge right there. It's absolutely pristine. Yeah, there was some sapwood in here and it's hardened. Yeah, and the sapwood has gone there very tightly. This is tight. Wow. Yeah, the down cut really is down cut. All right, maybe I'll just go and grab the jigsaw and cut this off. As you can see, the edges where it cut against the grain, it's absolutely perfect. But among the grain, there is some, otherwise it looks very good. But the interesting part here is how straight these edges are. It is pretty good, I think. You can probably see that there's a tiny gap in there. It is less than a millimeter, so not that big of a deal. I don't think I need to care about that after all. On the other way, it seems to be absolutely perfect. And on this way, I can't see any real difference. I think I'll cut another one from a different part of the material and let's see how that looks. I increased the plunge feed rate, which is how fast the Z-axis will plunge into the material, and slowed down the actual cutting. Yeah, that was much more undramatic and easier looking procedure. Feed rate was 1500 millimeters per minute and the RPM is 10,000. It looked pretty okay. All right, there was one knot in the middle layer and some sapwood in there, but otherwise this looks pretty okay. The plunge rate really needs to be quite fast because there are still some burn marks. I think it's pretty good, and let's now check the angles again. So the Y is here and X is here, so like that. So I believe this X direction should be pretty good, and it is. But then the Y direction, what I believe is a bit crooked. You can barely see any difference there. What I think now, that these differences go pretty much in the tolerances of machining wood anyway, so this is actually better than I thought. Let's sand this a little bit. A pretty nice cube. Now let's check the measurements. 57.4, I think. 57.3, and the thickness 57.6, I believe. What I achieved here from making wood, it's within 0.5 millimeters accurate. It's pretty okay. But what should I do with this? If you want to buy this with too much money, you can message me. Nice piece of Finnish pine. All right, I think the test was a success. This result is perfectly acceptable for me. In a way, how square it is in all directions. I think I can confidently cut the material this thick with that blade. The problem, however, is that the epoxy hasn't still cured. It is still pretty much wet and sticky, and I've been thinking. Welcome to the thinking corner of Project SeaCamel. Well, the problem is that it's too cold to use epoxy right now. It's now early September and the temperatures will not rise anymore. It's maybe 12 degrees today, Celsius, and epoxy, this brand of epoxy doesn't cure in these temperatures at all. I have now contacted with epoxy supplier that should provide me a little better epoxy for using in temps like these, but still I've been thinking of a second option, which is to, let's put it this way, the financial situation still is that I don't have enough money to buy the insulation for the shed in maybe a couple of months, I think, at least, but it would be great to get this project going on while I'm collecting that money. So I have pretty much now all the materials for the first frame, except for the epoxy, which should maybe come in next week. And in order for me to laminate that, I need to raise the temperature. And now what I think, I'm gonna build a box of insulation over that table and put some heating things inside there. So I can raise the temperature inside the box pretty easily and pretty cheaply without insulating all this hall. The insulation for the hall is really needed when I get to do the parts of the boat and laying them down on the floor. So that is still a few months away at least. I think next week I'm gonna go into the hardware store and pick up some insulation and put together an insulation box for the frames. And there is one additional positive side in that is that I can use the epoxy in this little cooler environment, have much more working time with the epoxy and with the lamination, and then I put the insulation box and heat it up and it should cure. So, how that sounds? I think this thinking corner idea was pretty good, don't you think? But yeah, now when I have this thing figured out, I will go and put together the filler pieces and make some clamps, and you have all seen that before, so I just make it really quick in this video. I would say that these clamps are now done. They are just going around here, like so, all around the frame. And next job is to make the insulated box on this table. So the nights are really getting colder. There is northern air stream coming, and that's why the nights are pretty chilly. I have long sleeves under my work clothes already. And I was kind of thinking, when I get a pace on this thing, I can get one frame done per week. That would be a great schedule. It's now week 36, so there is 16 weeks in this year. So maybe in January all the frames could be ready to go, and then we can start building the boat on there. Although I'm thinking I really need to do multiple things at the same time, so we'll see how the schedule starts to roll. All kinds of things to do. So, this is the filler piece I epoxied a while ago. It was too cold here, so the epoxy didn't cure, so I wrapped it in plastic and brought it home. But now there is obvious problem. And yeah, let's take it out from this plastic wrapping first. It's still a bit sticky. Some parts of the epoxy is still a little bit sticky. As for the obvious problem, which is the fact that there is excess epoxy on top here and on the bottom as well, so the surface isn't really straight and smooth anymore, which I should have been taking into consideration before I did this. So wood is actually just the right width for the frame. I can't really take off any material on either side, so I just need to take off the excess epoxy somehow. Well, this is something I learned from this practice, so I think I'm just gonna use hand planer or something very carefully and take the excess epoxy off from here. Yeah, it's definitely not so much on the back side, but on the front side, which was upside when this was 2 days here in the cold to cure. So otherwise this looks very good and feels very, very strong. There is no way I can separate them. So yeah, this is filler piece and that's all right. I'm just trying to figure out something to clean this mess up. In the future, of course, I'm gonna do these from a little thicker pieces and then plane them down in the correct thickness and then cut with the CNC. So this was a little bit of an experiment in that way. Always learning something. So I started to plane this. There was something wrong with the epoxy and the curing process, because when I started to sand the surface, it clogged the sandpaper immediately. I think the temperatures initially were just too low and the process didn't start properly, even though it was a few days in room temperatures to cure. But that's not really the problem. The problem is that now that I plane it, it's already maybe a millimeter too thin. So I think I'm gonna do this piece again and do it properly this time. A little bit of a bubber, but it's not a big deal. The next batch of epoxy is coming and it should be usable in lower temperatures as well than this particular stuff I used here. Still a couple of things to do before we can start gluing this frame. First one is that I bought some insulation panels to make the insulated and heated box on this table. And second thing is I need to figure out how can I make these joints into the slats. So obviously these are not long enough for that whole thing, so I need to join them somehow. By that I mean that when I put these into the mold, if I just put them like that, There is no way I can control how they move when there is epoxy everywhere. One option is to glue them together before, but that's quite a big job because there are so many of them. So I would like to do something little faster and easier. By that I mean I can take off some excess material if there is a knot or something, just to cut it and put the joint there. And I think I'm gonna do some kind of a puzzle piece joint with the CNC. After I have figured out that and made that insulated box, we should be ready to glue the first piece together, which is really exciting. This video is much longer than I anticipated at first. There has been so much small preparations, like making all those clamps and then making these filler pieces and yeah, all that kind of preparation. The actual build of the frame hasn't really taken that long. Milling these materials really took a few hours at maximum. So yeah, after this frame, when I have figured out all the details, like these joints and stuff like that, the rest of them should come pretty quickly. Really looking forward to that. Now that I have a few hours, still some time, maybe I should make a proper cleanup for this mess. There is a horrible amount of shavings and sawdust and dust and all kinds of all over. It's just amazing how much that accumulates over a few days. So let's do that now.